Liverpool lose this one in Turkey. Here is a look at the match stats, and we're going to talk all about it right now as we welcome in another member of our team. It is the ever dapper Stuart Robson. But Stevie, you know I'm going to have to come straight to you. What went wrong for Liverpool today?
Well, you know, it's that famous saying, deja vu all over again? Because this is exactly what it was. We've seen this video pretty much since the start of the season. A team that has plenty of possession, but going forward, has plenty of players forward, but there's no cohesion. There's no fluidity in it. There's no real open chances created either. I mean, considering you look at the stats with the amount of shots, with the amount of possession, you know, the Galatasaray keeper wasn't put under that much pressure. And then again, when they cough the ball up, as they've been doing, there seems to be a big hole in the middle of the park that stops anybody and everybody getting at the back line. And again, you saw today, Kairat being the culprit once again, but everybody else around them, including Van Dijk, just doesn't look comfortable when teams are going at them. So, yeah, we've seen it before, and Arne Slot is going to have to figure this one out because it's the same old game after game.
We were all doing the Community Shield. I was in London and you guys were here, Stevie, in the studio. And it was very early, obviously, and it was a Community Shield, but it was a bit of an occasion. Obviously, Wembley, the curtain raiser to the start of the English season against a very well-organised Palace side who kind of did what Palace do well. They sat back and they waited, and then they looked for those gaps and they hit those holes and they hit those balls over the top, and they really caused Liverpool problems. And we talked about the positioning of the fullbacks, the new fullbacks, to the tried and trusted centre-backs. You know, Kairat with Frimpong, Kerkez with Van Dijk, and the gaps were kind of worrying in that game, and you thought, OK, they're going to have to go away. This is really the area they're going to have to work in the most. I know they've signed Florian Wirtz and the midfield has changed in terms of the balance, but when you change both your fullbacks, you really then have to go work on your back four as a unit. And to be, where are we now, a couple of months into the season, and if anything, they've probably got worse defensively. This is a huge concern. The other concern I would have is, apart from the defending, the coughing the ball up, the playing in the wrong areas, all those sort of things that they're doing, the Florian Wirtz situation, which is ongoing. I know he's very early and he's a great player, but it seems that Arne Slot is square pegging into round holes here to try and figure things out. You signed Frimpong, you got Bradley, but more than one occasion you've played Szoboszlai at right back. He's one of the best midfielders, all-round midfielders in European football. So, just because you've signed some players, why are you weakening the team in one position to effectively weaken it in another? Even though he's done a decent job at right back in a couple of games that he's played there, that's a worry for me. That he's already at that stage of putting those pegs in the wrong holes to try and, you know, he might say it was to give somebody a rest, but it was trying to maybe to do, you know, because if Szoboszlai plays, Gravenberch plays, and it was Jones today, but it was usually McAllister. If those three players play, then Florian Wirtz either doesn't play or he's got to move position. Yeah. And if Florian Wirtz plays in the 10 role, then somebody's got to move position or miss out. And that's to the detriment, I think, of the team and the continuity of the team going forward, which is what they were brilliant at for the first 6 months last year. Consistency and continuity.
Yeah, Robbo, as the boys were saying, coughing the ball up, playing players out of place, it seems like it's getting a lot for Arne Slot to address.
Well, there was two things that were wrong defensively. First of all, you know, you can accept one if you're playing out from the back and you give the ball away and you're caught on the counter-attack and you say, OK, we've got to improve on that. But the two shot, the penalty and the chance that they had very early on when he gets in behind the right-back Szoboszlai were when they built up from the back. There was no real pressure on the ball. It was too easy to pass it out wide. So there was two issues defensively. You know, it wasn't just coughing the ball up. It was also when they had chance to go and press the ball in midfield and then they had to make decisions at the back, they made the wrong decisions. For the first one, when the left winger gets in, Kairat starts to go towards the ball when there's no reason for him to go towards the ball. He's got to drop off and defend the space. And of course, then when you're going forward, they don't look cohesive. There's a lack of understanding about where the movement is. I think they had two chances where they ran in behind. Isak, when he came on, had a shot with his left foot, and there was once Ekitike in the first half, very early on in the game, got a ball from Gakpo and got in behind. When Liverpool are playing at their very best, their front players are making those runs time and time again and getting in. When Mo Salah's coming from the right-hand side, that's not happening at the moment, or it didn't happen enough tonight. Only twice in the whole game against a side that, when you look at their midfield, when I saw Gundogan in midfield and Torreira, players that we'd seen a lot in the Premier League or for Barcelona in the case of Gundogan, they can't run anymore. They can't get around the field, but they were still more energetic than Liverpool's midfield. That's a worry.
The players are not helping Arne Slot either. I can't disagree with Craig talking about trying to put square pegs in round holes. But the players are not actually helping the manager, because there is nobody on that team who's actually producing what they're capable of. Maybe the closest one is Szoboszlai. And it's making it difficult for Slot. Bradley's not done well when he's played at right back. Frimpong struggled at right back. You've ended up with Szoboszlai at right back. Kerkez has had a shocker since he's come in, quite honestly. He's been bang average. Kanate has been really, really... he just looks devoid of any confidence. I can go through the whole team and talk about how they are not at their best. So not only does Arne Slot have to figure out the best 11 that plays the best together, but he's got to figure out who he can rely on, because right now, he can't, other than Alisson, who got injured tonight, him and Szoboszlai are the only two in that 11 so far this season. Probably throw Ekitike in. So that's 3 out of 11 that you can rely on. You don't win anything. Certainly you don't win the Champions League or the Premier League when you've got 3 producing and 8 you're not sure what you're getting.
Robbo was talking about cohesion going forward. You think about this. Andy Robertson last year wasn't, in the last year or two, wasn't the Andy Robertson of old, right? But it was still a sort of hybrid version where he still would get forward. Maybe not with the same aggression, the same speed, the same amount of times during the game, but he'd still get forward. He'd still be an outlet when Gakpo came inside, down that left-hand side to whip balls in. They're not getting that from Kerkez because, as Stevie said, he's struggling. He's just struggling defensively and going forward. And then on the other side, people talked about Alexander-Arnold's defending, but what you've lost on the other side is arguably the greatest range of passing that they had in their team. Balls over the top, balls in behind, dropping into midfield was what he used to do, and playing passes from there. That's gone. And to add a third string to the bow, Luis Diaz, who's gone to Bayern Munich, was one of the better ball carriers they had in their team. He could take it in, he could take it for a run, he could stretch the defence, and he could put the defence on the back foot. Don't have that either. So there's quite a few facets of the team that have changed in terms of how they approach it. No passing, they haven't got the same passing ability at right back. They haven't got a player at the moment in Kerkez who's given them basically a second left winger. And obviously, there was the Diego Jota tragedy in the summer. A player that always made a big difference whether starting or coming off the bench. And then Luis Diaz, who wanted to go to Bayern Munich, but as I think we'll all agree, was a player that could really take the ball for a run and alleviate some pressure. They've got Ekitike, they've got Alexander Isak, but they haven't got these players, and they've also got a Mo Salah who started this season, by his standards, very poorly.
Well, Robbo, an interesting quote from Arne Slot is where he was saying that this Liverpool right now is not so far off from the level that we saw from Liverpool last season that, of course, won them the Premier League. Stevie doesn't like that. He just said it after this game today, Robbo, but you're not buying that, are you?
Absolutely not. No, they look a far worse side. I know at the beginning of the season we said they're not playing particularly well, but they're getting results. So when they start to perform, it's great news for them. But we also said the way they're playing, they're going to start losing games, and how they're going to pick it up again. They've now lost a couple of games, played very poorly against Crystal Palace, played poorly again tonight. How are they going to get themselves back on track? There's a lot of work now for Arne Slot to do, and for the players as well. Players have got to build their confidence up. Wirtz has got to do something magical in a game to win over the fans and win over everybody that's watching, because at the moment he's not affecting the game enough. Ekitike has got to be better with his back to goal. He's good when he runs in behind people. And Kerkez, as both both the guys said, is having an absolute shocker at left back. He looks as though he can be beaten down one side and can't get forward with any quality when he's going forward. So there's lots of things that are wrong with Liverpool at the moment, and they're nowhere near the team they were at the beginning of last season.
I liken it a little bit to Real Madrid. Real Madrid under Ancelotti had that standout season, Champions League winners and La Liga winners. It was Vinicius Junior and Rodrigo. It was Bellingham having a standout, certainly 6 or 7 months of his first season, scoring goals for fun. And all of a sudden, the dynamic changed with 1 or 2 players leaving and Kelly and Mbappe coming in. And last year we saw the sort of ashes of the Real Madrid debacle, where Ancelotti, who is much more experienced and much more successful manager than Arne Slot, spent the whole season from match day 1 trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out the Vinicius, Mbappe, Rodrigo, Bellingham, how the hell do you make this work? And he couldn't. And he certainly couldn't to the same standard of the season before. Hence, they lost every Clásico and they were unsuccessful last season. And I kind of feel Slot's in the same position. We all sat here and said, what a great summer in terms of recruitment. That's an unbelievable... And on the face of it, signed good players, individually signed good players. But his big problem, the same as Ancelotti, was how do you get the balance of the team right? And at the moment, he's struggling big time to get that done. I mean, they're playing Chelsea at the weekend on Saturday. And could we sit here and say what we think his team's going to be? I mean, is Bradley going to play? Is Frimpong going to play? Is Wirtz going to play in 10, or is he going to play left, or is he going to bring Szoboszlai back into midfield? Nobody knows.
No idea.
We have no idea at the moment. And last year you could have shut your eyes and picked Arne Slot's team at this stage of the season.
You could probably say that the one thing that's going to happen is they're going to have possession again. I think absolutely they'll have possession again, which they've had in every single game they've played so far this season. But it's what you do with it. And right now, you know, we should never underestimate when you make so many changes, particularly to a side that was so good as a unit. And everything pretty much for 3/4 of the season was smooth. The word cohesive we're talking about, all of these things, they just happened. It just looked natural. It just doesn't look natural. Nobody's doing what we expected them to do. Not anybody on that side at all. And until they get that back, nothing's going to change.
Well, Robbo, at the weekend, one of our viewers asked us that when Liverpool lost, why is it that we talk about why Liverpool lost and not how Crystal Palace won? And it's Galatasaray that won today. And the reason that they won was that Osimhen penalty that we saw, which was just a nice reminder of how good of a player he is, which begs the question, what on earth is he doing in Turkey and not probably at one of the other bigger teams in Europe that need a striker?
Well, he was obviously brilliant at Napoli. He fell out, or Conte didn't really want him there. He fell out with Conte when he went there. And he's now playing at Galatasaray. There's lots of big clubs that should have taken him, but didn't take the chance on him. But what he showed tonight was a great awareness of where the space was. He kept on pulling out down the side of Van Dijk into the space that Kerkez had left. He was good with his back to goal. He was a constant threat. Yes, he scored a penalty, but he's a top-class player. And he's got energy, he's got pace, he's got a bit of a strength as well, and he's not bad in the air. So he's a centre-forward that, if you look between Isak and him, I still would say Isak's just slightly better, but he won't be far off.
Not far off, Craig. Is that how you saw it too?
Well, I mean, somehow we're going to
bring in United.
Somehow we're going to shoehorn, as discussed, Man United into this show today, even though they haven't played. But I mean, they opted for Benjamin Sesko, which is, you know, a much younger player, but he's also having these issues at the moment. I mean, it's not the easiest team to play in, I'll give you that. But he got a goal at the weekend at Brentford, but he really didn't do a lot else after the goal, if I'm being quite frank. So yeah, it's I think a little frustrating for Osimhen. I think he's just biding his time before he moves back to one of the, you know, I say Europe's big clubs. Galatasaray's a big clubs, but I mean one of the big leagues. But it all boils down to his contract situation and his relationship at Napoli. But he certainly is in the right team, a handful for even the most physical and quick defenders.
Well, Stevie, not to throw salt in your wounds, and obviously we're waiting for the next 24 hours to see the true extent of the injuries to Ekitike and Alisson, but knowing you have Chelsea at the weekend, plus all of the issues that we just spoke about, how big of a blow could their absences be for Liverpool now?
You know, obviously Alisson would be the biggest blow. At the same time, Kamadash-Vili is a great goalkeeper. You know, Liverpool has a squad to cope with injuries.
Oh, we're just hearing that Alisson is definitely confirmed out for Chelsea.
Yeah, but as I said, Kamadash-Vili is a fantastic goalkeeper. He would start on a lot of big teams in Europe. So I'm not that worried about that. I mean, again, Ekitike, that means we've got Isak. So listen, they're not, in terms of personnel, Liverpool's not in a bad place. Liverpool's in a good place. Unfortunately, though, they can't string performances together, and they can't get cohesive. Again, we're using that word, but that's really what the problem is. You know, Liverpool, with so much of the ball, you get the feeling that it's a matter of time before somebody does something. That's how much ability they've got. But in the last couple of games, they haven't been able to do that, which they did the previous 5. So, listen, Liverpool in a good spot personnel-wise. Just as a unit, they're not.
I think Liverpool, Arsenal and Man City in particular are in that scenario where there's not really a lot of tears for these clubs with injuries, because they've beefed up the squad so well in the summer and spent a lot of money. And, you know, we've seen it with Arsenal early in the season, with Saka been out and with Odegaard been out. And they've signed players like Eze and Madueke and others to come in and do a job. They've got 2 world-class strikers in Isak and Ekitike. They got players to come in and do a job. Their big problem is not injuries; it's the basics at the moment. I mean, Stevie talked about them, you know, in terms of the look, and they're just not doing the things that they were doing last year. Well, they look nervous. They actually look nervous on the ball, and just as if they're ready to make a mistake. They know they're going to make a mistake, and they know teams are going to exploit the gaps that they're showing. And I think if they don't figure that out by the weekend, and Chelsea have their own issues, obviously they're not in the greatest form, and they can't keep 11 men on the field, which is a problem for them. But going forward, Chelsea can be pretty good, and if Liverpool are as shoddy defensively, it could be a tough day for them.
Real Madrid pretty much dominating this game, something that we absolutely expected, especially after a long flight over there. They were actually closer to the Great Wall of China than they were to anywhere in continental Europe. Interesting. That's my little interesting stat of the day. But anyways,
You think it's interesting?
Cheers.
I thought it was kind of a cute little nugget. I mean, when you think
like laughing at your own jokes
UEFA
here.
Champions League, someone has to laugh at my jokes.
Well,
right? But good bounce back from Madrid, good reaction.
How far was the flight?
About 4,000 miles. There you go.
I was only kidding. But
Look, this is, you know, bounce back, expected. It makes not a jot of difference, really. This was very comfortable in the end. It's not going to take away the analysis and the pain and the questions from the weekend, where they struggled in quite a few areas, particularly the middle of the park, particularly the back 4. Particularly the left side of the back 4, the defending or lack of crosses into the box. We saw it in the first 10 seconds, that long sort of ball forward, and Huijsen, who had a very poor game at the weekend against Alexander Sørloth. He really struggled with his physicality. And that's an issue for Xabi Alonso. His team's looking at the Atletico game and saying, you know what, if we can get some width in our game and put good crosses into the box, they look as if they're struggling a little bit. So on top of that, and the team selection from the weekend, which I know we've discussed at length, Jude Bellingham, was he fit enough to start, blah, blah, blah. You know, they're not really learning a lot from this, just putting it to the side, saying, well, that wasn't a disaster, we got the 3 points. I don't think anybody really got injured to know. Mbappe continues his good form, which is important for him because they're going to need him. But yeah, in terms of learning anything from this game, not a lot.
Robbo, as Craig said, it's hard to read too much into this kind of a result for Real Madrid in terms of bouncing back after what happened at the weekend. But for you, what stood out?
Well, they struggled for the first 15 minutes. They were quite nervy, and the opposition was trying to close them down. The opposition played in a 4-4-2. But it all changed when they played Arda Güler in the sort of number 10 role, and they weren't quite sure how to pick him up. So time and time again, the ball got played to him because the 2 centre-halves were dropping off because they didn't want to be beaten by Mbappe's pace. The 2 midfield players were pressing onto the two deep Real Madrid players, and it allowed Güler to pick up the ball and pick his passes. And in that number 10 role, which we haven't seen him in too often in recent times, he looked to be an outstanding passer of the ball. Great vision, and of course, Kylian Mbappe's performance today, when you see him play like that, his pace, his understanding where the space was, his finishing, I mean, he was absolutely world class today. It was brilliant stuff against obviously a very poor side.
Stevie, what's it out to you?
I mean, I guess if you want to look really deep, if you're Alonso, you're thinking, okay, we got stuffed in the Clásico. We lost 5 goals.
Madrid derby, Stephen.
The Madrid derby, I beg your pardon. We're going to spend the day on a plane. We're coming to somewhere we should win, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a big crowd. They're going to be energetic. The opposition's going to be up for it. I guess in some ways, if you want to, you can think, I'll find out who the slackers are, who's going to bottle it, who's up for this, who doesn't really fancy it. And I guess the answer to that is the bright start that Kairat made, I guess was obvious was going to happen. But they come away from such a long journey, a tough weekend, with a 5-0 win. So if you're Alonso, you'll take that every day of the week.
The good news for him, I suppose, in one sense, if you're taking the positives from the weekend and from tonight and the start of the season, and there was really not many positives from the weekend at all. Maybe Arda Güler's goal and that sort of stuff, is that at least he doesn't have to worry about his star player. He's got a lot of other worries in terms of his team, but he doesn't have to go away and put his arm around his star player because he's a problem as well. Stevie, he's just doing it at the moment. It's the other facets of the game that he's got to consider. How do you get the best balance around Kylian Mbappe? Is it Vinicius? Is it Mastantuono on one side? Is it Arda Güler, as Robbo mentioned, behind? What do you do with Bellingham when he's up to full fitness? You know, all these sort of scenarios, and then you get to the back four, but at least he doesn't have to worry about Kylian Mbappe sulking and not playing well because he's doing his bit. Unfortunately for him, he can do his bit all he wants. But if the other parts of the team don't operate to a high enough standard, they're not going to be successful this season. So that's something he's going to have to figure out very quickly, because we thought this was going to be a 2-horse race in the Liga after the start of the season, and it is very early, but Atleti have kind of chucked their hat back in the ring and said, you know, don't quite rule, and I know they're hard to trust. Yeah. They're hard to trust over a long period, because we've seen them fall away before, but they've at least chucked their hat back in the ring, and they have, you could argue, along with Mbappe, the informed player in European football. And Julian Alvarez up front, who's scoring goals for fun, he's assisting, he's doing everything. So they've chucked their hat back in the ring. It looks like it's going to be a really, really tight La Liga title race. And that means Xabi Alonso is going to have to figure this out very quickly. They have a huge squad. They had a terrible start to the season by their standards. They've spent money again in the summer. But they've really had a brilliant week, starting from the Vallecano game to the Real Madrid game to this game here, where they just absolutely disposed of Frankfurt. And again, star players are in form. And the way they went about the victory over Real Madrid at the weekend was actually quite impressive. Although, even when they were 4-2 up and absolutely flying, looked as if they could score 5, 6 and 7, he did bring in all the subs as Steve McManaman touched on at the time to go back into that defensive, let's see the last 10 minutes out.
Cholo way.
And that's just his way. But they can, when they want to. When they want to, they can play some good football, and they got a lot of very good attacking players. It just depends on the manager's mindset before and during games, what tactic they like to sort of work on and deliver. When it's the attacking one that we've seen in the last 3 games for sure, they're actually quite fun to watch. Yeah. They're really fun to watch, is when they go into this shell of just trying to shut games down for like an hour. That's where I think they have their problems.
Robbo, about a week or even a week and a half ago, we had some serious concerns about Atletico de Madrid, and it's still so early on in the season. We even called their game against Real Madrid a must-win for them, and maybe even Diego Simeone. But now, looking at what they've done in the last couple of days, are Atleti just an overall better team than we were giving them credit for?
Probably not. There's a word that you always use when you talk about Atleti, and that's aggression, or their defensive work, the aggression they show when they're defending their box and how they get around the field. Now, if they showed the same aggression in their front play, which they did in the last 3 games, and Craig just mentioned it, when they're getting balls into the box, Sorlot's winning balls, Alvarez is running off the back of him, they're getting players in the box at the right time, they're passing it forward, they're running forward, they are an excellent team to watch, and they're really dangerous. But the manager seems to keep wanting to go back into that defensive mode, to be nice and solid, and it just takes away their creativity. and over the course of the season, they won't be aggressive enough in the top third of the field on enough occasions to, I think, challenge for the title.
One of the things, and I might be wrong here again, some stato will probably correct me, but it seems to me is Atleti have no problem getting themselves in the right frame of mind for these kind of games.
The big ones.
The big ones. We saw it in the Champions League last year, we saw it in the Madrid derbies, in the Barcelona games where there was a bunch of goals in those games, particularly I remember an absolute bonkers one at the Montjuic.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's against a lot of the teams in the bottom half of La Liga, if we're just talking about going for the La Liga title, where they don't have that intensity, where they allow the opposition, a chunk more possession than they should. And if you look back to last year, there was a bunch of teams where we thought, right, that's, they're going to beat them, and they dropped points. They dropped points to a lot of the lower teams last year, and that knocked them sort of off course and off momentum.
Don't you think though that one of the problems that I think they have is when the manager gets involved, when they're going forward, when they're trying to attack, when they're trying to create. As you say, they're great, but then it's when, this season in particular, they've gone ahead not just by a goal, but a couple of times by a couple of goals, and then they've sat and they've lost all the momentum. And then when you lose all the momentum and the opposition gets on the front foot, they don't have the type of players that they had 3 and 4 years ago that just sit tight and defend. Because you knew when they were 2-0 up, that was it. Yeah. The game was over. The game was done. You look at the team they've got now and you look at that back line, I'm sorry, I'm not a huge fan of Langley and Almiron. I'm just not. And so to me, when they stop going forward and they stop trying to play, I don't think they're really sure of how to go about it, because I just don't think they have the players that are capable of doing it.
It was the kind of savagery before. It was Jimenez and it was Savic.
Godin and all these guys.
Savic and Diego Godin. It was a fight every week. You know what I mean? They would, people like Godin and Savic would put their head in where some people wouldn't even put their boot. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it was. But Stevie's right. They've kind of morphed away from that. And I think that's a good thing in a sense, because they're trying to be more attacking. I think he is trying to be, and the goals will back it up. They are more offensive than they used to be. But there's something in the manager, there's just a little gremlin in there that keeps making him go back at times to that old DNA. And I think at times that gets them in trouble, because it just basically hands the impetus back to the other team. But what we've seen in the last week or so from them, let's give them their fair due, what we've seen in the last 7 or 8 days has been fantastic. Yeah,
at least he's allowing them to score a couple more goals and then reverting to that. Before they'd score one and he'd go back.
He probably hates 5 goals.
He probably hates 5 goals. He's like, come on, we should have locked up shop after 1-0. All right, here are some more La Liga games coming up this weekend. All of La Liga games on ESPN Plus this season. Make sure to tune in.
But games where they can give Kane and maybe 1 or 2 others a rest for a long season, because he's in his 30s now, Harry Kane, and a bit like Lewandowski at Barcelona, you need to be able to rotate these players. I mean, the player wants to play 50 games a year, but it's tough. So he's there to supplement the likes of Kane in games where Vincent Kompany thinks, well, we're playing weaker opposition, I can give him a game. Today's game, he played with Kane. I can't tell you, as I said, I'm not going to lie to you, I can't tell you if it was a 4-4-2, because that game was on the fast screen. And on the fast screen for obvious reasons. Because the result, we knew what the result was going to be. But fair play to Jackson. He's gone in there. He's been slandered by most, including us. He's had Uli Hoeneß, coming out saying he'll never be a Bayern player longer than a few months anyway. So it's not easy for the lad. And to be fair to him, he's on the score sheet. But he's going to be a squad player for Vincent Kompany between now and the end of the season.
Robert, much like Real Madrid's game, it's hard to read too much into this result for Bayern Munich. But if we're talking about Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, who do you think will have a deeper run from what we've seen so far in the Champions League?
It's very, very difficult to say. I mean, I still think Real Madrid, if they get everything right, can still be a really good team. We know that. They've got players to come back in. They need to get the best out of Vinicius Junior. They need to get the best out of Bellingham when he comes back. The manager's got to pick the right side. He's got to get the right balance. And if he does that, Real Madrid will still challenge for the Champions League. And I think you can say the same for Bayern. Are they good enough defensively? Is Vincent Kompany good enough tactically against the very best opposition in Europe? I'm not so sure about that. They leave themselves fairly open at the back, just leave the two centre-halves 2-on-2 at times, two full-backs push in. That's a dangerous way to play. So I still think Real Madrid will be a slightly better bet than Bayern Munich. But what Jackson does bring is, because Harry Kane doesn't run in behind anymore, if those two play together, there's a good combination. Jackson runs in behind, Harry Kane sits that little bit deeper, picks up the ball and starts to make things happen and still scores his goals.
Now, producer Mike wanted to shoehorn that question in about who's going to go further. And we were like, go to Robbo on that one.
I felt it.
Because Real Madrid, you know, it's
Real Madrid in the Champions League.
How long's a piece of string? Their Champions League record is excellent, but, you know, at the weekend, unless that was a one-off.
Well, look at PSG this time last year. They couldn't win they could hardly win a game in the Champions League, and look how they finished.
They struggled to get out of that.
Yeah, they just made it.
They just made it out of the bottom 8. Mm-hmm. I think themselves and Man City were vying for two of the most teams that you would consider one of the favourites to win the competition, who almost dropped into that bottom 8. And so that turnaround, as Stevie said, from them was just incredible. I mean, they were the best team by far in Europe when the season finished last year, the way that they manoeuvred the ball and the way they played. So you just don't know. What I would say, though, Luis Enrique had everything in place that he wanted. Yeah. It just was that they were not playing particularly well at the start of the season. But once they figured it out and got the balance right within the team and the personnel within the team, fullbacks, Hakimi and Mendes were absolutely... Vitinha and Neves in the middle of the park with Fabian Ruiz. And then, you know, obviously you could supplement it. It was Barcola, there was Dewey, there was Gonzalo Ramos if he wanted to play up front. And, of course, the Ballon d'Or winner himself, Ousmane Dembele. So everything clicked at the right time for PSG. Could you see that happening for Bayern and Real Madrid? No. I think there is too many issues for them to solve, for them to go on a run like PSG went on last year, where they were just basically dispatching everybody. I mean, they were a little lucky in a sense in the Arsenal game. That was a tighter game for them over 2 legs. But most of the other teams, they just completely pasted.
Don't you think that Real, if we're talking about Bayern and Real Madrid, don't you think there's a possibility that Alonso could find another gear for this Real Madrid team? I don't think Bayern have got any other gears. I think Bayern are what they are right now and will not change. I just think that if Alonso can sort out particularly the middle of the park for Real Madrid, I think Real Madrid's got another gear that's there. Just depends where he finds it.
But the thing is, what I would say with Bayern is they're not as reliant on one player at the moment. It's Luis Diaz, it's Kane,
Gnabry,
it's Elise, Gnabry. They got 4 or 5 before you even get to I know Musiala's out long term, so that's a blow for them. But you're guaranteed the goals with Kane. It's pretty much you are with Mbappe, to be fair, at Real Madrid. But I would say at the moment they've got more players that look like Bayern that are going to chip in, that are going to have Harry Kane's back when he's having a bad day. At the moment, for Real Madrid, maybe it's Arda Güler, maybe it's Mastantuono, but they're young players, particularly Mastantuono. They're young players, and we've seen glimpses from Vinicius Junior, but just glimpses. Yeah. We haven't seen the consistency. And until we see that, I think, certainly in terms of going forward, I think Bayern have a little bit more to offer across that front line than Real Madrid at the moment.
All right, well, Chelsea just get the win there. Robbo, we just want to apologize on behalf of our producer, Mike, who forced you to watch this game, because Chelsea, yes, getting the job done, but they don't make it pretty, do they?
Well, they didn't dominate the play. They had 59% possession, as you just saw there. But you couldn't say they dominated the opposition. They gave the ball away quite cheaply in midfield at times. It was a fairly decent game in terms of the counter-attacks. Benfica had their chances in the first half and didn't make the most of them. Benfica, I thought, defended quite well for long periods. The player that really stood out was Neto out on the right-hand side. He cut on his left foot. He got 3 or 4 good crosses. George hardly had a touch of the ball. Garnacho was okay at best. And Caicedo and Fernandes, did their bit in midfield. But Chelsea at the moment have got 1 or 2 problems. They at times pass it too slowly. They give it away cheaply in bad areas. And they have problems defensively. Not today, because Benfica didn't quite have enough to break them down. They got a lot of crosses into the box. They had 1 or 2 good moments in the first half. but didn't then carry it on in the second half. So it was a very competitive game. It was a very even game. Chelsea won by that own goal, and that was about it, really.
Craig, I know we talked about this a couple of seasons, a season or two ago, about Arsenal and when they were accumulating a lot of cards and if discipline was an issue there. Now we're seeing Chelsea once again in another game being reduced to 10 men. Is this becoming a problem for Enzo Maresca?
Well, let's look at it's not been over aggressive. Well, that one was maybe a silly high boot. I'm trying to think back. The Brighton game, what was the Brighton sending off again? Do we remember?
And Chalobah for Brighton and then Sanchez against Man United.
They gave the ball. That's right. They gave the ball away. It got pinched.
Chalobah's weekend. Sanchez
and Chalobah was denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity. That was just bad play. He was put in a position. And the Robert Sanchez one was bad decision-making. Getting himself in the wrong position so early in the game. And so I wouldn't say that's bad discipline. The high boot is a little bit. He only come on in 60 minutes. João Pedro. So he was only just on the field. So to get 2 bookings, and particularly when you're on a yellow, to raise your boot as high as that, whether there's contact or not, it's just crazy. So I don't think, to go back to the point about Arsenal, the Arsenal ones from the centre halves were, I think, over aggression, getting involved with the referee, dissent, all these kind of things that you can, Leandro Trossard kicking the ball away, then moaning about. That's something that you can stop. What you can't stop is when you're put in a bad position by your team making a mistake, which Sanchez was, to a point, which Chalobah was to a point. So that's not something I would worry about too much. But if my player's getting sent off for dissent or 2-footed tackles or stuff like that on a more regular basis, that's something that you need to address. Obviously, it's not brilliant when you keep going down to 10 men. And if they do it at the weekend against Liverpool, they're going to be in trouble. But it is 3 red cards in 4 games if you include the cup tie against Lincoln.
If you look at all these red cards individually and isolate them, as Craig said, it's not really. No, it's not. It's situations that have occurred that are kind of out with the person's control. Again, you could say João Pedro shouldn't be. But João Pedro only had eyes for the ball, raised his foot too high. He didn't make any contact. He's not kicked somebody in the face. So in isolation, they're really not what you would say disciplinary problems, as opposed to the Arsenal ones where it's kicking the ball away and getting in the ref's face. That's a completely different ballgame.
Was it not as well? There was a Trossard one at Man City. There was the Declan Rice little toe poke at home, which was very, it seemed very silly, but it was the correct decision. And then there was, I think, Ben White at Wolves, it might have been the year before, where he had 2 yellows within 10 seconds or so in the right back position. So, it's stuff like that as a manager, you've got to say, listen, I get it. It's an emotional game, and sometimes you want to have a moan at the ref, and sometimes you're frustrated. But in this day and age in particular, you just don't want to be getting red cards for silly little petulant things. And Arsenal were pretty bad for it for a year or two. They seem to have cleaned that up. 3 reds for Chelsea in the space of, 10 days or so is far from ideal.
Let me get everyone's opinion on this, because we know Mikel Arteta loves trying new interesting methods to give Arsenal an edge, and his latest effort involves fighter pilots. Let me tell you what he had to say. He says, I can wake up one day and say my process on match day is not good enough. Why are we communicating to the players to actually how the message is delivered? I don't like it. So who's the best at that? So the British fighter planes, for example, I will get in touch with those guys, how they communicate, because that is life and death. I'm sure they don't use 20 phrases or 20 words if there is one word. Don't say, nah, the wind is coming this way, now you have to turn left, because boom, dead. So it will just be one word. So Mikel Arteta there working hard to try and improve his communication with players, to maybe not use as many words as some of us like to hear.
Surely that just involves engaging your brain. I mean, I'm not being funny, but
at least he's trying new things.
If I walked into a bar and there was only me and him in the bar, right, and he was sat at
You buying him a drink?
No, I'd go and sit at the other end. As far away as I could, because I wouldn't want to listen to that kind of nonsense. I mean, it's nobody pulling him to the side.
Aye.
It's none of his coaches pulling him to the side and going, hey, do you know how stupid this sounds? Do you know how stupid you're making
Not if they want to keep their job.
You don't want people that just kiss your backside. You want somebody to say, listen, come on. I mean, what's he talking about? How to communicate? I mean, all you need to communicate is a brain and to be able to articulate it. I don't need to talk to a fighter pilot to keep it concise, to send a message to a player. I mean, this goes back to the documentary and listen, he's doing a good job. He's doing a good job. They have a very good side and they have probably as good a chance as ever of winning the league. It's not going to be easy, but they're in a very good position in terms of the squad. So I get all that, but really? I mean, really? Do we need this nonsense?
No, it's not even funny anymore. It's just stupid and it's getting embarrassing. And the one thing when you when you do it to begin with, stuff like this, it's original. And the players will kind of have a little laugh and a snigger, but they'll listen to you and the rest of it. But when you start doing it consistently,
you start questioning everything.
You're just turning people off. Nobody's listening to you. Nobody's listening to you. That's all he's doing. And 100%, I'm with Craig. One of his coaching staff needs to turn and say, Gaffer, I think we need to leave this now.
Robert, what do you think on this? Because I know you're always a fan of new, innovative ways of communicating.
Well, absolutely. I think you have to admire coaches or players who want to improve themselves or pundits who want to improve themselves. But you don't go telling everybody what you're doing and coming out with stupid ideas and stupid sense. And I think he contradicted himself there because he said, if you have to use 20 words when you can only use one, you're doing the wrong thing. Well, he used about 50 words there when he could have just used a couple. It's complete bonkers. And somebody at some point, as the two guys said, I've got to say to him, you're not doing yourself any favours. You're only doing this for your own benefit, and it's not working. You know, the players aren't going to take any notice of that. Any decent player will say, what the hell is he talking about? All you want to know as a footballer, what do you want me to do? What are the tactics? How do you want me to perform week in, week out? And what's my role in the team? That's all you want from a coach and a manager, not this sort of rubbish.
I think the only line you need to say to Arteta is, have a day off. That's all you need.
Do you know what the other thing is as well? I don't want to go on about this, but there's quite a lot of problems around the world. I mean, we're talking about RAF fighter pilots here.
Yeah.
Do you think they've got nothing better to do in the day, apart from their training and keeping the country safe and all that, to go in and speak to Mikel Arteta?
They may love it though. They may feel honoured that Mikel Arteta is calling them. Maybe a quiet day off.
We got a day off. That's why.
We are in sitcom territory here with this guy. Honestly, with some. I mean, this comes off the back of the documentary with all the light bulb stuff where you're sitting going, really?
And the pickpockets.
What was the pickpockets?
Because
I didn't watch the documentary.
He brought some pickpockets to the training ground to take things from the players to teach them that they need to always be alert.
But we've just had the Man City game where he went to the press conference and he got his cell phone and he says, every Tom, Dick and Harry in the country basically has been ringing me up telling me how good we were. Presidents, chief executives, managers, coaches, they're all ringing him. They're all ringing him to tell him how great he is and Arsenal were. So we're off and running at the races there with that one. And now, off the back of a big win against Newcastle, a big late win, you just think, hey, let's just get on the training ground and keep this momentum going. No. RAF fighter pilots, you couldn't make it up.
You should have reminded him what happened after played You'll Never Walk Alone during the training sessions. How did that one work out for Arsenal?
Not very well.
Not very well.
Do you ever think he is overthinking this scenario?
Again, have a day off. That's all he needs to do. Completely.
All right, welcome into Extra Time.
What happened?
Our director, Mike, killed the Man United chatter on the show today. There was just too much more to talk about. Why do we want to talk about United again?
Yeah, we don't.
No, we don't.
Oh, well.
I mean, we'll probably, maybe tomorrow. There's some interesting manager odds.
Well, no,
She started it.
That's true, I did.
Yeah.
Can't help it, can I?
No.
Can't help it, can I?
It wouldn't be a show without a bit of
Man United.
bashing, yeah.
Well, you did bring them in a little bit in our Champions League chat when we were talking about Osimhen and teams that needed a striker.
Well, all we know is they need to they'll need to beat Sunderland at home at the weekend.
Ooh, because it could be goodnight sweet prince for Ruben Amorim. All right, let's get into the questions. Craig, this first one's for you. Liverpool brings you on as a midfielder consultant to find a solution so that Wirtz can perform for the club. What advice or solutions are you giving them?
Solutions?
I suppose what advice would you give given the current situation with Wirtz at Liverpool?
Play your players in your best position. And if that means leaving people out, it means leaving people out. If that means leaving Florian Wirtz out, that means leaving him out. But play your players where you're going to give them the best chance. Szoboszlai, we saw him again at right back. He's a willing participant. But he's the captain of his country as a midfielder. He's a goal-scoring midfielder. He does a little bit of everything. I mean, that's the only thing I would.
I think the Szoboszlai one 100% makes you think that he's trying to shoo people in just because, as opposed to what you're talking about there. As opposed to, right, this is what we are. This is where you play. This is where you live. But the fact that you've got two guys, one that you actually bought to play fullback, another one in Bradley, who absolutely you can rely on as a fullback, but you're playing Szoboszlai ahead of both of them. You shoehorn them in. I don't like that.
Robbo, I know Craig was the one that they asked for advice, but I always love some advice from you. What advice would you give Liverpool to deal with the Wirtz situation?
Well, I was just going to add another thing to it rather than give advice. He bought Frimpong, because Craig's talking about shoehorning people in. Frimpong played as a right wing back for Bayer Leverkusen, so he never really plays a right back or a right wing. He plays a right wing back, and Liverpool don't play with a right wing back, so they bought a player that they don't have a position for. And Florian Wirtz often played in a sort of inside left or inside right position, not in the number 10 role or not really out wide. So again, they've bought a player and they're trying to now change their formation or their system to suit the players, or the players have brought in to play another role. So it's not working for them at the moment. So again, he's got to find a system that works for the team, get a system that works for the individual players, and stick with it for a few weeks to see whether they can get some sort of continuity. Because at the moment, as Stevie has said many times, they lack cohesion.
At Bayern Leverkusen, the year they won the title, not last year, he shaped everything around Wirtz. I mean, even last year when they weren't as successful, if you look at the times Wirtz was out the team injured, he would sometimes change the whole shape of the team. He'd play a three at the back, as Robbo said, with wing backs, and depending on Wirtz's availability, sometimes he'd play a four, and he'd chop and change the midfield, and everything revolved around Florian Wirtz. But this Liverpool team's not built to be all around one guy.
Yeah.
It's had its success as a unit, both under Klopp, but especially last year under Arne Slot, where they were still very good to watch, but they were much more compact defensively, and they've completely got away from that. And that can only be because of the new personnel that have come in. Obviously, the fullbacks are struggling at the moment, but B, when you change the dynamics of the middle of the park, then the protection for your back four changes. It just does.
Well, there's none now, right?
There's not a lot now.
No.
And that's putting pressure on Konate and Van Dijk, and they're now relying on two less experienced fullbacks to help out. So it's a tough situation for them. But they're in a pretty good position, considering. But if you've watched all the games rather than just picked up a league table and looked at, Liverpool, if you'd actually watched the games, it's been a struggle.
All right, next question.
Just add another thing there. Sorry, just to add another thing there. We've been saying how good Gravenberch has been over the last year and a half, and how well he started the season. He was one of the players that was doing well. Not tonight. That was one of the problems they had tonight in the game, that Gravenberch gave the ball away. He didn't seem to be athletic enough this time to get around the pitch to cover the full-back space. So that was a big worry, I would say, from tonight's match. Gravenberch didn't play as well as he has been.
All right, next question then. How difficult is it to play on an artificial surface when you normally play on grass like Spurs today?
Different game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, is that artificial in Norway because of the weather? Yeah. I didn't know that. But the hybrid pitches they have now, like they have here in the US, they're certainly 100 times better than some of the stuff that we had to play on at Loftus Road QPR or Kenilworth Road, Luton Town back in the day. They were proper artificial pitches. They were horrible. I think today's is much, much better, but Stevie's still not the same as playing in a good grass surface.
They're much, much better, but the fundamentals of the game change. The ball bounces differently, completely. I mean, so basically when it bounces, usually when you're playing on a grass surface, they're not all exactly the same. But we're talking, minute differences. When you're playing it on an artificial surface, it's a completely different ball game. So straight away, you're under the pressure with that. Striking a ball is harder on an artificial surf. You have to strike it in a different manner. So basically, when you step on an artificial turf, you're going away from all the things that you're used to. Just like landing on another planet, quite frankly.
Goal celebration.
And then of course, you stick it on top of a grass field. It's even worse. So, yeah, proper games should not be played on artificial turf.
But they can't help it over there because it's like, you know, just to get the games played because of the weather.
Take this one up.
Kick them out.
Kick them out. Kick them out of the Champions League. I don't think Jad will be too happy with that. Next question is for Robbo. Robbo, you were always one to criticize Haaland's involvement in games and general link-up play last season. Thoughts on his clear improvement as an all-around striker this season?
Absolutely. You know, I've been saying many times, come on, he's got to get involved. I've watched him closely and he's made no effort to show for the ball. He's when the ball's been played long, he's lost the duels against the centre-halves and it's Man City haven't been able to go and join him. This season, he's been different. He's looked hungrier to get on the ball. He's made better runs. He's been stronger with his back to goal. He's won more balls in the air and he now looks like the world-class striker that he should be. So, yeah, much better from him this season. It's really good.
But they've also... Arsenal game apart where they did a lot of defending. They've also got it forward a bit quicker this year, Man City. I mean, there's still a little bit of playing out from the back, but there's more going forward, longer, earlier and quicker, and that at least gives him, you know, because it wasn't, I do agree with Robbo, but it wasn't always him. You know, sometimes as a striker. I mean, Gyökeres has had a little bit of that at Arsenal where, you know, you can see him making runs, trying to bend his runs to get in the little channel between the full-back and the centre-half, and they're going from side to side to side. It's quite frustrating as a front man.
Yeah, because you don't know when it's coming.
Yeah.
You just don't know when the ball's going to come.
All right, well, final question, and it's for Stevie.
Yes.
For Stevie, I've asked this question before, and I'll ask it again after the last two results. Any similarities between Slot's current setup and Erik ten Hag's midfield setup when he was at United? Both were easy to cut open. Craig's looking intently.
Hold on, I'm just trying to work out in what universe the league title winning Liverpool team from last year with the same personnel with an added extra in midfield is compared
to Erik ten Hag's Manchester United.
Yeah. But I get the question.
The only similarities they have right now between Liverpool now and ten Hag's then is the midfield are not together and don't really seem to be able to know and figure out what each other are doing. That would be the only similarity between the two. Because Erik ten Hag's never at any stage figured it out, whereas Liverpool did figure it out and won the title. Just haven't done it yet this year.
The only similarity is that they've both had some issues in that area. United for a long period, Liverpool for a short period. That's where it ends, because Liverpool have very, very good players in that position that have shown they can be the best in the league, whereas Man United do not and continue to not have that.
Robbo, final word on this before we wrap?
Yeah, there's no comparison at all. When you think that they had Casemiro and Eriksen at one point in central midfield who couldn't run at all, and Bruno Fernandes trying to join them that can't defend or doesn't want to defend, you can't compare that with the Liverpool side who on their day have still got good athletes and people that want to close the ball down. It's just not quite happening for them at the moment.
All right, well, that's it. That's the end of the questions. Thanks to everyone for sending them.
Yeah, thanks.
Stevie and I have earned a day off tomorrow, haven't we, Stevie?
I think so.
I think so.
Back
Craig
again.
Burley will be back.
PSG Barcelona tomorrow.
PSG Barcelona tomorrow.
No Tottenham Bodo Glimt. Oh, thank God
geez.
for that.
Hopefully that one will make you, I suppose, stay awake a bit more during the games, right?
I beg your pardon.
Or you won't need 4 cups of tea.
Thank you, manager, for throwing me under the bus.